Hello, welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about mechanisms of evolution. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. We are now in subunit 2 of the process of evolution. So this is entitled The Origin and Extinction of Species, and in this video, we are specifically going to talk about the mechanisms of evolution. In the previous video, we have established the different evidence supporting evolution. We've seen remains of organisms that can be preserved in the form of fossils. We've seen evidence that suggests that for every layer of the Earth, different fossils can be found by the paleontologist and geologist. And by determining the date of those different rock formations, they were also able to determine the age of the fossils that they found. And they saw that for every layer, there are different groups of organisms, and they tend to not repeat themselves, or they different organisms can be found in different layers. Okay, and we've also seen transitional fossils that show characteristics of both the ancestral species and the descendant species, suggesting that there was really the evolution or the change of those ancestral group to more modern descendants. So transitional fossils as seen here, for example, from Archaeopteryx, from Australopithecus africanus, and from Tiktaalik are all conclusive supports or conclusive evidence of evolution based on fossil record. Another strong evidence of evolution would be found in anatomical structures. So we've seen the presence of vestigial structures in organisms. So these are structures that are no longer needed or even used by the present species, but are still part of their bodies because they used to be part or structures of their ancestral species. We've seen similarities in the embryonic development of organisms that are closely related. And we've also seen homologous structures of body parts of organisms that share a common ancestor. So these are more support, stronger support that we are actually related to one another and we are descendants of a common ancestor. We've also seen similarities in the DNA, amino acids, and proteins of organisms. We've seen the action of artificial selection or selective breeding, that human activities, human interventions can actually influence the evolution of organisms. So if artificial selection can produce wide varieties of organisms or breeds, or if we can alter the traits or phenotypes and traits of one ancestral group to based on what we find as beneficial traits, that we can actually alter the appearance of its descendants, then it is an additional support that changes over time are actually possible, both naturally and both through human-induced selection. I've mentioned this in the video about the discovery of evolution, but I would just like to give emphasis that everything that we know and claim about modern interpretations of evolution theory are not just based on one single work. Okay? It's not just based on Darwin's natural selection, but the collaboration, integration, and interrelatedness of different fields of science all point out to the same thing. So what we know about modern interpretations of evolution came not just from Charles Darwin, but also from the laws of inheritance by Mendel, from findings in cytogenetics, about population genetics and molecular genetics. And again, I would like to emphasize that whenever we say evolution, we are not just referring to change of species, or we are not just referring the evolution of man, but we actually refer to the following underlying themes or major concepts. So the modern theory of evolution states that genes are the ones who are responsible for the inheritance of characteristics. This has been established in the field of genetics. That populations and individuals are the ones who evolved. Okay, so we cannot say na just because one organism was born different, then the species have evolved. No, it has to be the entire species, the entire group of organisms, or the entire population. They must be the ones showing the new trait or the evolved characteristic before we can say that they have evolved. And the processes for that, aside from natural selection, as proposed by Charles Darwin, but also through genetic drift, which we will talk about in this video. And that lastly, speciation or the creation of new species or the categorization of new species is due to gradual accumulation of small genetic changes. So the term here is gradual. It takes time. It takes hundreds, thousands, even millions of years before we can say or justify that these species have evolved already. So it does not happen overnight. It does not happen through swift mutation. It has to be exhibited within the genes, it has to be exhibited by the population, and it has to undergo gradual accumulation of genetic changes. So I just want to clarify these two concepts that we have discussed in the previous videos. So whenever we talk about mechanisms of evolution, what we want to learn here are the ways that different organisms evolve, okay? Because there's just no single path to evolution. Some would go in this path, some would go in this path. So those are the things that we will discover. So again, I would like to emphasize on the following concepts, okay? Because it will help you appreciate better everything that we will discuss as we go along. So again, according to the modern synthesis theory of evolution, populations are the ones who evolve, not individual organisms. And we define population as a level of organization. It is a group of interbreeding individuals, okay, of one species. So again, always with letter S, always in plural, even if we're just talking to one group. So one species in a given geographic area at the same time. So this is how we define a population in biology. A population can evolve because they contain a collection of genes. Okay, so again, genes, those are the segments of DNA that code for a trait. They can be inherited and passed on from parent to offspring. And the collection of genes of all the individual in a population is part of their gene pool. Okay, so those are the collection of the genes of that population. So as changes in the gene pool of the population occur, the population can also evolve. Okay, and we've discussed in central dogma of molecular biology how small changes in the DNA can actually alter the expressed proteins, amino acids, and proteins of the cell. Next, two of the most relevant mechanisms of evolution are natural selection from Charles Darwin, we will discuss that, and genetic drift. Okay? So there's no just a single pathway to evolution. Organisms can also evolve through genetic drift. Okay, one of the main issues in population genetics is concerned with the importance of both mechanisms in determining evolutionary changes in species. And lastly, natural selection usually predominates in large populations. Okay, so natural selections act out on large number of organisms, whereas genetic drift usually are the driving force in smaller populations. So these again mirror all the tenets or principles of the modern synthesis theory of evolution, and these are the things we will look into as we go along. In 1700s, when Carl Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist and also known as the father of classical taxonomy, developed his system of classification, he divided all organisms in only two kingdoms, plants and animals. However, the use of the microscope and the improvement in technology led to the discovery of new organisms and identifications of difference in cells, in DNA, in structures, and other categories in which taxonomists base their categories. Therefore, a two-kingdom system was no longer useful. So today, the system of classification now includes 7 kingdoms. Okay, and I'm presenting to you again the tree of life that shows us the branching of species as they evolved over time. So this is one kingdom, another kingdom, another kingdom, and all that. Okay. So if you ever wish to pursue a course in biology or biology-related course in college, one of your subjects will definitely be taxonomy and systematics. Okay, so this is the core of those subjects. How organisms are classified based on their similarities and differences. Now, if you're interested, you can actually check out the online library. So this lesson on taxonomy and systematics will be discussed in biological diversity. You can actually check it out in online library. So the tree of life tells us that organisms can actually trace back their similar ancestors from each other, and that allows our taxonomists and scientists to group organisms based on their common ancestors. So these are the major groups of organisms. So we have here your bacteria, archaebacteria, eukaryotes, all these three major groups. So you have your plants here, you have your vertebrates and invertebrates. So these are the major groups of organisms, and they share common ancestors with each other. So wherever you find this area of the tree of life, it means that all the organisms here share a common ancestor at this point. So of course, this one is actually a simplified tree of life. If you are interested, you can actually visit this interactive tree of life from onezoom.org. Okay, I'll provide the link in the description below. So this will let you input here the organism that you are searching for, and then through an interactive application, it will show you how that organism or that species are connected to other of its related species. So this is actually quite a fun interactive website to visit. I really have a great time whenever I use this. So I'll provide the link in the description below. Now, since humans are categorized as animals, we are part of the tree of life. Um, but I also looked for a more detailed tree of life for humans. So I recommend that you visit this from Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. They have here an interactive human family tree that shows us the related species of our human family, and then our common ancestors as well. I'll provide the link in the description below. Now, just to zoom in, so this is the human family tree. So we have a common ancestor with the rest of the hominids. Okay, so this is one group, the Ardipithecus group. Then you have your Australopithecus group here, and this is the Homo group. Okay, so this is where we can find the group of the species of humans. Okay, Homo sapiens. So the Homo group, like modern humans, other species in this group have large brains and use tools. Members of this group were first to expand beyond Africa. So you have here the modern man, Homo sapiens, but also together with this group, we have Homo neanderthalis, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis. So this is our relatives, okay, our cousins in terms of species in terms of evolution. And we all share a common ancestor with other groups, okay, other groups and other primates. So humans, we are part of great apes, and we are one of the members of the Homo group. So again, I recommend that you visit this family tree from Smithsonian National Museum. I also recommend, if you're interested to watch this, actually I require that you watch this video, the 7 million years of human evolution, just so you could have an idea on what it took for the modern man to reach our current status right now. That we have outlived all of our previous relatives, and how our species underwent a lot of changes in order to be better adapted with our environment. So this will also show you our relatives again, okay, our relatives of other hominins. Okay, so I'll provide the link in the description below. This one is from PBS Eons, another favorite YouTube channel of mine. So your place in the primate family tree. So I require that you watch this video. So they mostly talk about the same thing, no? But this one is a more elaborate discussion on what happened to our relatives and where do we actually categorize humans in terms of the tree of life and phylogenetic trees. I also recommend that you watch all those videos from PBS Eons, their Human Evolution Learning playlist. Okay, again, this is another a very good YouTube channel. So you can watch the following videos: your place in the family, in the primate family tree, when we first walk, when humans were prey by bigger animals, when we first made tools, and when humans took over the world. I'll provide the link to this playlist in the description below. This one also, two videos from Kyrgyzstan, What Happened Before Human History, Human Origins, and A New History for Humanity, The Human Era. So these are very good resources, well-researched videos that explain to us the journey that the human species went through over time. So I'll provide the links in the description below. This one is from It's Okay to Be Smart, their playlist on the human story. So I require that you watch these videos to understand better. So where did humans come from? Why are we the only humans left? It will tell you what happened to other human species. Okay, the Denisovans, the Neanderthals. What happened to them? Where are they now? And then are we all related? So again, that's one of the driving point of evolution, that we are all related with each other because we share a common ancestor, and we did not just appear out of nowhere. And then CRISPR, mostly though, we've mentioned this during our lesson on perpetuation of life, specifically how genes work in genetic engineering. Okay, so it talks about CRISPR and the future of human evolution. I'll provide the link to this playlist in the description below. Now, these are more recent videos, okay, that I'm sharing with you. This one is from Vox, proof of evolution that you can find in the human body. Okay, I recommend that you watch that video. And this one, just I think this is just days ago or a couple of days ago. Is human evolution speeding up or slowing down? So we have established that humans are products of evolution. There's no doubt about that. But is it speeding up or slowing down? Okay, so I recommend that you watch these videos. This one is from TED Ed, and I'll provide the link in the description below. And lastly, this is from Tech Insider, a projection, a research about a projected appearance of humans in 1,000 years. Okay, quite an interesting video to watch. You will learn a lot from it. I'll recommend that you watch this. I'll provide the link in the description below. And this one is from Incredible Things. This is actually a work from National Geographic Channel that took photos and tried to predict what the average American person will look like in 2050. So because of mixing of races, because of mixing of gene pool and changes in the gene pool, you will see a drastic change in the phenotypic traits of an average American 30 years from now. So I also recommend that you visit this website, linked in the description below. Now, this video will actually help you get an overview on what we will discuss as we go along. So I recommend that you watch this video entitled How Evolution Works. I'll provide the link in the description below. Another similar video, How Evolution Works and How We Figured It Out. This is from PBS Eons. So again, I recommend that you watch this. I'll provide the link in the description below. This one are more references about the mechanisms of evolutionary change. This is from Nectunct Morris Hominum. I'll provide the link in the description below. Another one from Understanding Evolution, the Mechanisms of Change, from Berkeley University. Again, linked in the description below. So these are the different mechanisms of evolution that we will look into. The first one would be from for natural selection, then genetic drift and its two types, the bottleneck effect and the founder effect, mutation, and gene flow. Natural selection is a very powerful driving force of evolution, and for the longest time, scientists thought that this is the only cause of evolution. So we described this as a phenomenon wherein some individuals with certain traits in a population, okay, what makes them different from the rest of the population, could have higher chances of survival and chances to reproduce than others. So if they are the ones who only survive, then they're the only ones who can pass on their inheritable genetic features to their offspring. Okay, so of course, if you did not survive, if you die, you have lower chances of reproduction, then you cannot pass on your traits. So evolution acts through natural selection, whereby reproductive and genetic qualities that prove to be advantageous to survival, okay, traits that are advantageous to survival will prevail and can be seen in future generations. So what led Charles Darwin to think about natural selection was when he collected specimens and he looked at the different beaks of finches, so that's a type of bird, in Galapagos Islands, and he saw that these species seem to be closely related to each other. However, their beaks are different, and they are mostly based on the type of diet that they have. So Darwin thought that there's a possibility that they are descendants of a common ancestor, but they just happen to evolve different beaks just so they can be better adapted to the diet that they have. So the beak of each species is suited to its preferred food, suggesting that beak shapes evolved through natural selection. Now, I recommend that you watch this video from Stated Clearly that explains what natural selection is. I'll provide the link in the description below. So natural selection, again, is a process by which nature, the environment, is the one who selects those who will survive, technically, based on their adaptations, okay? So, and those who will survive are the ones who can actually successfully reproduce because they're alive. They are the ones who can find a mate and have offspring. So the more genetic diversity or variation in a population, the greater chances for adaptability and survival. And I think we've talked about this in perpetuation of life, the advantages and disadvantages of asexual and sexual reproduction. That while asexual reproduction takes very few time or short time to reproduce, and all the offspring are technically clones of each other. When should there be diseases or should there be a catastrophe, then all of them might perish. While those that are products of sexual reproduction and sexual recombination or genetic recombination, they produce varieties within their offspring. Okay, that's the reason why if you have siblings, you are not clones of each other. Even if you have the same parents, you have differences from your siblings. And that variety within a family can be amplified when viewed at a population level. So the variations of organisms in a population allows them to have greater chances for adaptability and survival. So this is natural selection in a nutshell. Variation within a species, and then of course we know that there's overpopulation of offspring. So variation in the species will undergo selection based on what's needed to be adapted in nature. Then it will be passed on to its offspring. That's why there are still variation in the next generation. Then further selection. If this keeps on happening over and over and over, generation after generation, then there will come a time that the modern offspring or the descendants could be significantly different from its ancestral group. Then we can say that evolution have occurred. Another thing I want to emphasize, so again, this has already been mentioned in the modern synthesis. Natural selection operates on individuals. So natural selection, those who will survive or who will not survive, operates on individuals, but it is the population that evolves. This selection, variation selection, over and over successive generation, must happen within the population. Okay, in order for us to conclude that they have already evolved. Okay, if it only happens in an individual, that's not evolution yet. It has to be the entire population that will evolve. Okay, classic example. So for example here, this is a population of giraffes. Okay, so as you can see, there's a variation within their neck length or within their height. So some of the giraffes here can have shorter necks, or while some have taller necks. The same reason that we have varieties within human population. Some of us are curly haired, some have blue eyes, some are taller, some are stouter. So we have varieties within a population. Any environmental change or environmental pressure, okay? And this, we've talked about this in ecosystem, in interaction and interdependence, that once you reach overpopulation, sometimes, or most of the time, the organisms will feel environmental resistance. Okay, so either environmental resistance or environmental change will select for taller giraffes. So, for example, maybe all the shorter trees or shorter plants have died out. Only those that are found in tall trees are the ones who survive in their habitat. So only those who can reach the leaves of the trees can eat, okay, and can survive. So of course, if you cannot reach the trees and you cannot eat it, then if you are a short-necked giraffe, you will eventually die out of starvation. So only those who can reach the tree tops, or the trees, or the leaves in the trees, or the fruits in the trees, can eat, can survive, and can reproduce. Therefore, they are the ones who will pass on their traits in the next population, in the next generation. So we can see here that the short-necked giraffes have died out, and now there's a greater number of long-necked giraffes, okay, in this generation. If that selection continues, we still have tall trees that cannot be reached by the short-necked giraffes. Then only those long-necked giraffes can survive and can reproduce. If this keeps on happening for successive generations over a span of hundreds and thousands of years, we will see that eventually the trait for short-necked will disappear from the gene pool of the population. Okay, no one is carrying the gene anymore for short-neck. Okay, if that keeps on happening, then you have here a pure long-neck group of species of giraffe. Okay, and if they happen to be introduced to short-necked giraffe, that's the ultimate test. If you introduce this group, okay, this descendant group to the ancestral group, and the long-necked giraffe no longer interbreeds with the short-necked giraffe for whatever reproductive isolating mechanisms, okay, whatever it is that separates them or prevents them from having sexual intercourse, or even if they could have sexual intercourse, the offspring are sterile, okay, infertile, then we can say that this group of descendant species or descendant giraffes has now evolved and is now considered a different species from their ancestral group. So this is how evolution through natural selection, again, evolution through natural selection could happen. This is just one way. Okay? Variation in the species, selection, reproduction, and then over successive generation could lead to evolution. Here is a classic example on how organisms try to adapt to their changing environment, but this time through results of human activities. Okay, so humans can greatly alter the environment. So, for example, here we have the peppered moth, Biston betularia. So within the species of these peppered moths, we have two colors, okay, or two variations, light-colored moths and dark-colored moths, okay. In an unpolluted trees here as their background, we can see that the light peppered moths or light colored moths have higher chances of survival because they can camouflage themselves and they can blend with their environment. While the dark colored moths can easily be seen by their predators, so they can be eaten easily. So they will not be able to reproduce. Then eventually, their numbers will dwindle down within the population. However, because of pollution, okay, some of the pollutions were able to blacken the tree. Okay, due to industrial pollution, they have blackened some parts of the tree. So in this way, it's now the opposite. The dark-colored peppered moths are the ones who can easily blend in with this new altered environment, while the light-colored peppered moths are the ones who stand out, okay, and they are the ones who get easily eaten. So because of this change in their environment, because of this change, it pressures the selection of species who will of variation who will survive. So here, it's constantly the white peppered moths that are selected, and the dark ones are not. But in this change in environment, they are the ones, the dark colored ones, are the ones who are better adapted to their new environment, so allowing them to survive better and to produce more offspring, therefore passing on their traits with higher rate of chances than the white-colored moths. Now, natural selection is not the only mechanisms of evolution. It's not the only one that drives evolution. Another way that organisms evolve is through genetic drift. And this was proposed by the biologist Sewell Wright. Okay? And it refers to the change in the frequency of a gene variant or allele in a population due to random sampling of organisms. So if you remember, natural selection happens or mostly operates on large population, while genetic drift operates on smaller population. So genetic drift has two types, bottleneck and founder effect, which we will discuss as we go along. So they have significant effects in smaller population. So if you're wondering, a population's genetic frequency is the fraction of copies of one gene that shares a particular form, okay? This can actually be computed, and we could have an activity about it for you to better understand. Now, eventually, genetic drift can cause gene variants to disappear completely if they are not selected, or they are the ones who happen to encounter that catastrophe, and therefore reduce genetic varieties or variation within a population. I recommend that you watch this lecture video from Khan Academy, Genetic Drift, Bottleneck Effect, and Founder Effect. I'll provide the link in the description below. Genetic drift is a random event, a stochastic or random event that happens in nature, and it can greatly influence or change the allele frequency within a population. So allele is a form of a gene, right? So this results into some alleles being completely lost within a generation because of that random event. Okay, even if they are beneficial to the organism. So this is not because of natural selection. It just so happened that because of that event, they were the ones who got removed from the population. So let's look at this classic example. So we have here a population of rabbits. Okay, so within that population, there are two variations of their coats: the brown coat and white coat. Okay, so um, just so happened that if these are the ones who got selected to reproduce, for example, there might be a hunter who hunted all of these five rabbits, okay, or a bushfire or a forest fire accidentally killed this group. So they just for no reason, not because of natural selection, not because they are not well adapted to their environment. It just so happened that because of an event, they did not happen to survive or reproduce. So just for no reason, these are the ones who managed to survive, and they are the ones who managed to reproduce for the next generation. So as you can see here, since they are darkly colored, they have dark fur, there's higher chance that their offspring could also have darker coloration. So if this keeps on happening, maybe this gene, for no reason, for not the for their fault, or not because they're not adapted, just because they were not selected. So eventually, this gene, this allele for the white coat could be lessened in the population. And just so happen again that these are the ones who happen to reproduce, okay? So since these are the population, there's a higher chance that you will have a brown fur mate. So these are the ones who could possibly mate. Then then mostly we can expect that all of their offspring could have the brown fur. Now, there's no adaptation here to survive in nature. There's no environmental change. There's no camouflage effect here. Just so happens that they are the ones who were selected for whatever event. Then they are the ones who pass on their trait. Then they are the ones whose traits are seen in the future population. So this is how genetic drift works. Okay, not like natural selection wherein you have to adapt and survive. Here in genetic drift, just because of a random event that happened in nature. Now, one example of genetic drift is the bottleneck effect. So this occurs when there's a sharp decline, a sudden sharp decline in a population's size. This is typically due to environmental disasters or environmental factors, that's unforeseen. For example, earthquakes or tsunamis, sudden epidemics or volcanic eruptions or fire, whatever that can reduce or decimate the number of individuals in a population, okay, for some reason, or destroy their habitat or have an effect on their predator-prey relationship. So bottleneck effect is usually caused by sudden disasters. It is a random event in which some gene are extinguished from the population for no fault of their own. Not because they are not well adapted, it's just that, they're the ones who got caught in the fire, or they're the ones who got burned, or they're the ones who died during an earthquake. So because of that, this results in a drastic reduction of total genetic diversity. So again, genetic drift reduces the genetic variation in a population. So there's no more variety. Okay? The small surviving population is considerably farther from the original one in its genetic makeup. Now, why is it called bottleneck? Okay, so for sure you've seen a bottle. Okay, so here we have a wider part of the bottle, and then around its neck, then you have here a smaller part of the bottle. Okay, so it narrows the survivors in a population. So, for example, if this is the original population, there's variation within a population. Okay, so you have brown, then yellow, whatever it is. For example, these are insects. Okay, brown insects, then yellow insects. Okay, um, so for the next generation, okay, if there's nothing happening, nothing destroying their habitat or whatever, then there's higher chances that all of the genes will be seen in the next generation. Okay, so everything's okay, everything's normal. However, around this time, okay, a bottleneck event happened. Okay, a disaster happened. For some reason, an earthquake, a fire, or whatever, or a flood. And these are the ones who happen to survive no, for no reason whatsoever. It did not take them hundreds of years of adaptations or millions of years. In just one event, these are the only survivors who got left, or okay, who are left in the population. Okay? So as you can see here, for this event, we have here three yellow-colored insects and then brown-colored insects. Okay, because most of the brown-colored ones disappeared in that bottleneck event, in that catastrophic event. So because of that, there's higher chances that in the future generation, more and more yellow insects in the surviving population will be the ones to reproduce. And if this happens over and over, eventually the gene for the brown insect would eventually disappear. So what remains are mostly yellow-colored insect, for example. Okay, so this will now become the final population of that species. So how do we know that they are now, a different species? Well, if you introduce a yellow-colored insect with this brown-colored insect, and they don't happen to recognize each other anymore, they do not mate anymore, or even if they do, they cannot produce a fertile offspring anymore, then we can say that this one has evolved already. Okay, this one is on its way to evolution to becoming a different species. So it happened. We start off with large genetic diversity. There's our two kinds or two colors in that population. A bottleneck event, a catastrophic event, randomly chooses who to survive, or these are the ones who happen to survive. Over successive generation, it can reduce the genetic diversity because there's only one color left here. So the final population is no longer genetically representative of the original one, and a change in the gene pool, okay, in the allele frequency can actually signal the evolution of this species. Another type of genetic drift is founder effect. Okay, so you will have an idea here, founder effect. So this is the loss of genetic variation when a new population is established by a small number of individuals that are cleaved or that are removed from a larger population. So in some cases, this effect plays a fundamental role in the emergence of new species. Okay, and I hope you will recognize the examples as we go along. So because the community is very small or isolated from the large population, some genetic traits are becoming more prevalent in the population. So this could lead to sadly presence of some genetic diseases in the next generation, or could actually cause the emergence of a new species. So here we have here a diagram, okay, that will explain founding effect. So for example, if this is the original population, so as you can see, there's a wide variety, okay, of these beetles, for example, of these beetles. So you have black, yellow spotted, you have red beetles, okay. Now for some reason, again, a random event happened. For example, um, if they are found in an island and the island suddenly had an earthquake which divided into two, okay, one group are found in one group are left in this one island, or they went in one of the islands, of the new islands. And then this group are the ones who got separated. Okay, for some reason, there's no adaptation here. There's no long process or long periods of survival and selection and survival and selection. Just so happens that they're the ones who got included, okay, in that new islands. Okay, so this island divided into two because of an earthquake. One group went here, another one group went in that other island. As you may have noticed now, just for no reason, these are the ones who got selected, okay, who survived. So it's expected that their offspring will most likely look the same. And if that keeps on happening over and over, their future descendants will just have these traits in their gene pool, will just have this frequency in their gene pool. While the other founding populations, for some reason, the red ones and the yellow ones are the ones who got selected, and then after several generations, several generations, they are the ones who happen to evolve in this manner, right? Right? They are the ones who pass on their traits. Now, this is now the group of or the population living in one of the islands, another population of beetles in other islands. Now, how do we know that evolution or speciation has occurred, or there's now two new species? If they happen to be introduced with each other and they no longer mate or produce a fertile offspring, then we can say that because of that event, there are now two species or subspecies or variants of the original population. And eventually, if this keeps on happening, they will move on and evolve on their own. This will move on and they will evolve on their own. Now we have two groups of two descendants or two groups of descendants from the original population. Another mechanism of evolution is mutation. Okay, it is the change in the DNA sequence within a gene or chromosome of an organism. Most of mutations are neutral or silent. They can neither harm nor benefit, while sometimes they can be deleterious or they can cause diseases or even death, or other mutations can be beneficial to the survival of the organism. So again, deleterious mutations can affect the phenotype and reduce the fitness of an organism to survive. So deleterious mutations can cause diseases, even death, while beneficial mutations can lead to reproductive success and adaptability, okay, of an organism to survive in its environment, okay? They can be spread or fixed in the population, possibly due to natural selection, if they're the ones who are constantly selected. Now, since we're talking about DNA, I just want to review now that genes, again, are segments of DNA that code for a trait. So, okay, so this is a segment of the DNA. Your DNA is this double helix structure, okay, double-stranded structure that are found, that can be coiled into chromosomes during cell division. And they are found within the nucleus of every cell of your body. Okay? So DNA is considered as the molecule of life because they are the ones who code for proteins. And proteins are the ones who make up our body, who runs our body, who are part of the structural integrity of our body, even our pigments and hormones. Those are made up of proteins. And those proteins are actually made based on the DNA code that are found in your genetic material, in your nucleus. So again, um, genes are segments of DNA. DNA are coiled in chromosomes. Chromosomes are found in the nucleus, and then nucleus are found within the cell. So basically, all your cells in your body, all trillions of your cells are carrying your genetic material. Now, changes in genes can happen at different levels. It can happen within the gene, within that segment of DNA. It can happen within the entire chromosome, or it can happen within the entire genome or all your genetic material, okay? A gene mutation is a change in the sequence of nucleotides in the genetic material, okay? So just here, okay? The change in the CCG, AAT, CCA, just a change in those nucleotides is called gene mutation. Chromosome mutation can refer to the change in the chromosome number or chromosome structure of of a chromosome. It can be deleted, it can be inverted. What else? It can be translocated. Well, genome mutations are alterations in the number of chromosomes in the genome. Okay, it can be aneuploidy or euploidy. So aneuploidy, there could be addition or subtraction in the chromosome number. Instead of having for example, in humans, instead of having 46 chromosomes, the offspring had 45 or 47. Or euploidy, there's a total replication of the entire genome set. To learn more about gene mutations, I recommend that you visit this lecture PDF from the online library on the central dogma of molecular biology, and more about chromosome and genome mutations from this lecture on genetics. Again, this can be found in the online library. Now, these are two videos from Stated Clearly that explain more about mutation and how they are driving forces of evolution. So this comes in two parts. So part one, how does new genetic information evolve through point mutations? And part two, how does new genetic information evolve gene duplications? I require that you watch this video from Stated Clearly, and I will provide the link in the description below. So to learn more about gene mutations, I recommend that you visit this website. I'll provide the link in the description below. This one also from Learn.Genetics, more on genetic disorders as products of mutation. I'll provide the link in the description below. The last mechanism of evolution is gene flow, or also known as gene migration. This refers to the transfer of genes from the gene pool of one population to another, and this may change the frequency or the alleles of the population, again, due to the migration of individuals that reproduce in a different population. So the introduction of new alleles increases the variation within population because there's new people coming in or new organism coming in into the location and allows new combination of traits. This process acts against speciation by recombining the gene pools of different populations, repairing developing differences in genetic variation, and minimizing genetic difference within population. So gene flow or gene migration is because people are migrating or going, or organisms are migrating or going to different places, mating with the new people there and creating new hybrids or new sets of combination of genetic composition. Plants are good ways to show gene flow. Okay, they can experience gene flow by spreading their pollen long distance away to other population. Okay, by means of wind or through birds or insects or even bees. Okay, so for example, this plant is only found here in this area, for example, but once the wind carries the pollen, it can reach long distances, and then once they land on the soil there, and then they germinate, then they can grow and become a new plant there. Okay, they just happen to be carried by pollinators to different areas, therefore carrying the gene pool or carrying the genes of those plants into the gene pool of possible species there. So once there, the pollen is able to fertilize the plants where it ended up with and then become a new organism. So I kept on mentioning people under migration because actually humans are is the best example for gene flow. Human migrations have occurred throughout the history of mankind and and are as defined as the movement of people from one place to another. This is an infographic from National Geographic, Global Human Journey. I recommend that you visit this part of their website. I'll provide the link in the description below. So this is their map that shows us the global journey of the human species. Okay, so um, our species Homo sapiens has been around this planet for 200,000 years. Okay, and we most likely, based on fossil records, based on genetics, based on DNA profiling, based on all those identifying traits, our species mostly originated in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Okay, so this is where our species most likely originated from. And the first movement or the first migration or the first gene flow could have happened between 70,000 and 50,000 years ago. So it went from this region to this region. Okay. And then we migrated, number three, we migrated along this India and parts of Asia, even passing through the Philippines, okay, around 50,000 years ago, back to Australia, okay? Okay, I think you've discussed this in social studies, if I'm not mistaken. Then the fourth movement could have happened 45,000 to 35,000 years ago, back here in Europe and other parts of the continent there. And then the fifth movement could have been around here, upward movement of human migration in this part of Asia, okay, up to Russia, and then possibly crossing land bridges there. Also here, there's a chance that our ancestors might have crossed the land bridges. So around 20,000 to 15,000 years ago, we have reached this part of North America, down here to South America, and then occupying this region. Then around second would be from this part of Asia, moving here to lower parts of Southeast Asia, and then extending into the different islands in the Pacific Ocean. So this is based on evidence, this is most likely how our ancestors were able to colonize the world, okay, by going through migration and gene flow. And then as they migrate, as they meet new sets of organisms there must be chances of interbreeding. Because I'm not sure if I've shared this in Google Classroom yet, no. But our ancestors, Homo sapiens, used to interbreed with Neanderthals, with Denisovans. That's why we still have Neanderthal DNA in our modern population because of products of those interbreeding. Okay, this one is another map from Encyclopedia Britannica that shows the same thing, that 200,000 years ago, our species originated from Africa, then moved into other parts of the globe, in Europe, in Asia, in North America, going to different islands of Southeast Asia, Australia, and islands in the Pacific Ocean. So this shows us the migration throughout history and the possible origins of our species. So that's somewhere in Africa. So to summarize, these are the established mechanisms of evolution. So this is why we know evolution happens. These are the ways different organisms can evolve through natural selection. Okay, so based on their variations, those who are able to adapt to their environment are the ones who survive and pass on their traits. So those who can hide from predators, such as these brown bugs, they're the ones who will most likely reproduce and pass on their traits. Another mechanism of evolution is genetic drift. Okay, so we've talked about bottleneck and founder effect, that for some catastrophic event, natural disaster, earthquake, or volcanic eruption, there's a possibility that a certain group of population or a certain number of population will be the ones to be eradicated, and for some reason the survivors are the ones who pass on the traits, okay, for no for not because they are not well suited or well adapted, it's just so that they're the ones who survive that chance event. Then mutation, okay, can lead to variation within a species or variation within an organism, and some of the variation or some of the mutation can be beneficial, so that allows them to survive and reproduce, while some mutation can become detrimental, and then that can cause diseases or even death. And finally, gene flow, the migration, okay? Migration of one species to other places can cause them to bring their own gene pool into the new location, interbreed with the existing species there, and produce um, offspring with genetic recombination. So this is how scientists know that evolution could occur, and it is not just through natural selection. Evolution can also happen through genetic drift, through mutation, and through gene flow. Lastly, to summarize everything that we've discussed about mechanisms of evolution, I recommend that you watch this video from TED-Ed, The 5 Fingers of Evolution. Everything that we have discussed will be summarized in this video, and I'll provide the link in the description below. That ends our quite a long video. I hope you learned something new today. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.